Welcome to the Questions Podcast, where I ask questions of people I admire. I'm your host, Laura Wimberly. I think our parents met when I was about 4. So I think that's how far back
Wow.
our families go. Yeah. So my first memories of you
That's,
were just every now and then coming in because your parents led worship at the church. So you would come in every now and then and play drums. That's what I remember.
yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so, you just play drums? What else did you do? Kind of how did you get into the music industry or decide you wanted to do that? Was that a part of your life at a real young age?
Yeah, definitely at a young age. I was always coming up with, let me turn my notifications off. So sorry. Um, I was always, writing songs, coming up with band names and,
Yeah.
um, doing garage band type stuff. Not like Apple garage band, but just literal garage band. Yeah, breaking into my dad's church to, hop on the drums or, turn the amps on. We were the Bible Belts in Texas, we were the crazy people that clapped our hands and had drums in the church. Um, so yeah, from a young age, music was like a 10 out of 10 for me. So, and even through sports, which I loved sports, basketball, soccer, tennis, and then playing collegiate tennis, and then a little bit dabbling in even the beginning stages of the pro circuit. I loved it, but music was always 10 out of 10 for me. And so, yeah, my oldest brother, Court, played the drums at church, and he was 7 years older. So once he went off to college, they were kind of like, who's going to kind of play drums and lead worship? At that point, it was just literally my mom on piano, my dad singing, and no bass, no guitar. I really wish I had a video of it because it was probably awful. Um, so yeah, that's how I got started. And then progressed in just loving playing the drums and would play, talent shows and bands and different things like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
I remember playing probably at the location on, is it Water Street or
Yeah, Water Street. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So when did you, thinking about sports and stuff, when did you decide to go into the music industry? When did you feel like you wanted to have a career in music in some way?
Um, I didn't necessarily know I wanted a career in the music industry. I just knew I wanted to be around creativity. I wanted to be, creative myself. I wanted to be writing and recording music. Um, and then early on having kind of more of a like a father's heart to pour in to other creatives as well.
Mm.
So I just knew I wanted to be around that world and the opportunity, you know if I had been in a town going to ministry school that didn't have something like Bethel Music, well then who knows, I may have never gotten actually connected to a music label
Mhm.
per se. Maybe I would have, but um, because that was actually being birthed at the time in 2010. Jesus Culture had just kind of had been happening for a little bit, I guess since 2007 or something. And they were the youth group at Bethel. So before they moved and shifted down to Sacramento, that was happening up here when I moved in 2000 or came up to school in 2009. And then Bethel Music was just kind of a seed form then. So because that was going on, then once I got done going to school and then obviously got connected to, the different people that were helping lead that label. Um, then it made sense because it was really, they brought me on for more of like the artist relations piece.
Mm.
But early on, I remember, Joel Taylor, who was the CEO at the time, kind of saying, "Hey, I want you to be focused on artist relations, ships and stewarding the artist care, but you need to know the albums, process." So he put me as album director, and
Wow.
I began to, learn, the 6 phases of an album from, ideation to song development to pre-pro production, mix master, manufacturing, distribution, and then marketing and all that stuff. So really got an education in the music industry over the 8 years. And then I ended up having, I think I had 7 or 8 different roles while I was there in the 8 years, and really got to see almost every aspect. Well, I saw every aspect of the music industry, but basically got experience in almost every aspect of the music industry. And we were working because we had a global presence. We were working with, huge labels. They're Christian imprints, but Capitol CMG and Sony Provident and you know Curb Word and all those. So really getting to know a lot of people in the industry and learning how it functions and how it ebbs and flows. It was a great experience.
Wow, that's amazing. So you're the owner of Black Box Sound Co. Studio, founder of Fathering Hearts, and you also have a band called Allen Music. Is that right?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
yes, it's fathering artists.
Father artist.
Fathering hearts. Maybe I should have called it that. But no, fathering artists.
Okay, okay. So what made you want to open up a music studio?
I mean, anytime, I mean, even from a young age, there was something I was so enamored with. You remember the tape recorders, the long rectangle tape
Yeah,
recorders?
yeah.
And if you could go get tapes that you could record on, but then you also could tape the top of a tape like a normal tape. And so if I ran out of, if I didn't have any money to go buy, blank tapes, I would go and find a cassette that I didn't listen to anymore. And we'd tape the top of it and go in and record us playing our songs, And so I just loved that immediate kind of like, wow, we can create something or we can play a cover and then we can hear it back. And so you also using it as a tool to just get better because, once you hear yourself recorded, you're like,
Yeah,
yikes, that wasn't great.
yeah.
Or wow, that was a good moment there. And so I just was in love with it. So, as I really, when I came up to Reading in 2010, it really was the launch of my more creative and musical season. My kids really got swept up into that as well. Um, and I still play sports. I play tennis some. I've gotten into pickleball. I taught some lessons here when I first moved here just to make some extra money. So I still love that, but I really was focused on more of the creative side, the music side. So as I got into that and just developing relationships in Reading, and then obviously working at the label and having songs inside of me that I wanted to flesh out and record. And I kind of in my mind I was thinking like, man, if I'm gonna try to steward the journey of a bunch of artists, it might be smart for me to really understand
Yeah,
what that takes
yeah,
and what that means. So not only did I love the creative process, not only did I love being in the studio. I mean, I could stay in a studio recording a song for days. Um, I always tease my wife, like if I actually knew how to turn the buttons and turn the knobs and push the buttons, she might never see me. So God's grace that I've just never actually learned how to produce. But I do work with producers
okay.
and I just love being in the studio. So yeah, so that started kind of recording some of my own music. A band really came together, honestly, as I thought I was going to have to lay it all down. So I'd gotten done with 2 years of school. I was wanting to intern with Jeremy Riddle or someone else that was kind of cultivating creatives in Reading, and all those doors were shut. And I basically the only door that was open was to be a revival group pastor in second year.
Mm.
And a bunch of people had kind of encouraged me in that direction. But I remember vowing in the mirror when I was a little kid in Kerrville, not because I didn't respect my dad. I love my dad, Bruce Allen, fantastic. I just didn't ever want to be a pastor of a church. I saw what the life was like, and I saw the commitment and the weight that they carry to steward a flock of people, and I just kind of thought I would never do that. So when the revival group pastor came up, I was like, no, that's something I've definitely put on my not to do list. Um, and long story, I won't go into, but it was really kind of miraculous way that he confirmed that to me. Um, and so in that process, it was a real dying to myself because I thought by taking that job, my creative dreams were over. I was going to be into the pastoral role, and it was done.
Mm.
And but he confirmed like, yeah, this is what you should do. And within like the first 2 months of taking that job, my creative dreams started to, manifest in a way that I could never have imagined. And so in that time, a band kind of got put together and we started writing music. We thought we were going to be a worship band, but our worship songs were awful. So everything that we were writing was like, kingdom people, kingdom DNA, spiritual foundations, but it was just songs about life and love and relationships and things like that. So I just followed the thread, pulled the thread, and it was first called Amber Nation, now it's called Allen, and we've released a bunch of music. And I love doing that. So in 2017, um, I had started a live music platform called Black Box Soundstage.
Mm,
Um, and the name Black Box, I'll give a little bit of context there. Is this okay?
absolutely.
Okay, I'm going off the rails here.
Oh, I love
Uh,
it.
so Black Box, we called it Black Box because on airplanes and trains, I don't know if you know, have you ever heard of the black box that, like, even if an airplane crashes or a train wrecks, they have these black boxes. They're basically indestructible and they're recording all of the communications.
Yeah.
And so they'll know what happened, whatever. So my yeah, that was kind of the DNA starting point of calling it black box was like, man, could we create a space, a protected thing where this precious information, this like vulnerable creativity that, creating this platform for people to, you know, give their art a shot and get onto a platform and try out their music and things like that, but that it would be protected and that it would get into the hands of the right people to listen to that information. And so that was kind of the DNA of calling it Black Box. But I started a live music event because once a month in 2017, and we've had close to 400 artists on the stage in that time, even through COVID. We had to take a break, obviously, but there was a lot of creatives that came to Reading, but unless you were on the worship team or had a worship bent, other art expressions really didn't have an outlet. And so that was kind of why I started it. And so, and then through that, it's kind of like I was doing Fathering Artists, which was more of like an artist development platform through retreats, mountaintop retreats. And then, so between those two things, they needed to record. And so wanted to do a studio to kind of house, and meet that need. So it kind of created an ecosystem that fed one another. If someone came into the studio, they would hear about the live performance opportunities and, maybe someone came to a retreat and then wanted to record something. So
No,
yeah. Yep.
that's awesome. Do you have any advice for people that may want to start a studio? Kind of looking back, maybe you did some things that worked and some things didn't work.
Um, used to when you say start a studio or build a studio, it was probably a very um big undertaking because the way that they still do build crazy amazing studios. But the equipment and the ability through, new software and DAW, digital audio workspaces and microphones and, YouTube training and the ability to get, some soundproofing and sound panels. It's so easy to create your own studio now in your garage. You said your friend has one.
Yeah.
Um, so from that standpoint, it's a little bit of a lower risk to just give it a go. You can get in there and start trying to record some things. There's tons of plugins and things that you can do what they call in the box recording, where you can create sounds through loops and you know different software programs that have a lot of cool sounds, and you can write a song in a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Used to it would take you a long time, and you had to get engineers and all this, detail. So I would say, I mean, if you have a heart to do it, just start.
Mm,
Just get going. Like start low scale. Get a buy Ableton or get GarageBand or Pro Tools or Logic or something, and just start learning it.
yeah.
Um, and once you dig in there, you can get a lot of help through resources like YouTube and so much education and teaching that you can find to help develop that skill. But I mean, and also like if you're doing it for your vocation, well, then obviously you would want to be in an area that has artists, that have creative people that are, wanting to record and potentially have the money to pay for the recording.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So a lot of times, the producers that I've found have started to do it just for themselves. I just want to record. And then once they learn, then a friend kind of comes in and then record this person. Then they get better at it. And then those people tell people. And then all of a sudden they start attracting clientele.
Yes.
And that's why Nashville is so, attractive for, especially, you know, Christian artists. But honestly, now it's any artist. LA and Nashville and New York are the three main hubs. But there's just so many creatives there that are wanting to record music.
Mm.
So, um, yeah, it's definitely a thriving creative ecosystem there.
I'm really impressed and fascinated by your organization that you founded, Fathering Artists. How could someone get involved if they wanted to be a part of that?
Okay, so I started back in. It kind of started. Well, I'll back up even further. I got invited to a singer-songwriters and poets retreat in Austin when we lived there. I was married, had a friend that had a ranch and invited a bunch of his buddies out to do some songwriting. So everyone loaded up all their gear. I mean, I took my drums, my
That's
djembe,
awesome.
my guitars, keyboards, everyone came out there and we broke up into groups and there was different cabins, beautiful piece of property. Anyway, as we got going, as anyone that writes songs or tries to record music, it's not the easiest process. And I don't believe in writer's block. I just believe that there's fear, there's
Mm.
resistance, there's, fear of failure, imposter syndrome that keeps us from just keeping going, honestly. But as those groups started to hit resistance at this retreat, it was a crash 23 years ago. That everyone just quit. And so we ended up just fly fishing and hanging around. It was like a bro weekend. But the plan was to write songs. And then all of our friends and family were going to come out to this barn and we were going to have a big barbecue and everyone was going to play their songs. But it didn't happen. And it made me so mad. I was like, no, I'm committed to this. Like, let's do this, just because we're having a hard 30 minutes or a hard hour, let's figure it out. And so that marked me a long time ago. So fast forward, I was in second year and I just started gathering some of the students that were in the ministry school at Bethel. And we just started writing. So that's kind of how it started. And then after that year happened, um, I got hired on late in August. School was about to start in September. And so because of that, they already had the class schedule. For all, a lot of the revival group pastors would teach these um, AMTs, they were called advanced ministry training, something like that. And I wasn't going to have to teach a class that year. And so in my mind, there was a great quote that I learned a long time ago. And it was, I think, an army general. He said, the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. Like when nothing's being required of you, what are you doing? So when that invitation or that requirement comes, you don't fail. And I knew I was going to have to teach next year. And so I was like, I'm just going to start a Fathering Artist mock AMT. And so I did. So I started that, ended up having like 20, 25 people sign up for it
Oh,
and just doing crazy creative exercises, like just following the Holy Spirit, following my gut, following the things that made my spirit leap and got me excited, and would just do those things with these students. And then that led to having our first mountaintop retreat in Medford, 16 people, and we would break up into groups. And then that next year, I started teaching in the school a Fathering Artist course and would have like 60, 70. I think one year I had 115 students take the class. And then out of that, we would always do a retreat. It would culminate into a retreat. And so that's how it kind of started. And it was really kind of this, because of that initial experience 23 years ago, I wanted to create an atmosphere where I would help these artists and songwriters cross the thresholds of fear and insecurity and doubt. But we were going to finish something. So the whole impetus of these of retreats is start a song, finish a song, perform a song.
Wow.
And we break them up into groups and we do a bunch of activations to get them going. And we put different coaches with each group and we have speakers come up that give, not just conversations or teachings about how to write a song, but also just the identity of an artist. What's motivating you as an artist? Like, what is a healthy, internal world? What is that going to contribute to the byproduct or the fruit of what comes out of your pen onto paper? And so, yeah, we've done those since 2012.
Wow.
And now it felt like, we didn't want to do that to create a label or start a publishing company to get these songs. That was a byproduct that started happening, good songs being created. But so it was kind of just an organic growth over the years of us learning more about ourselves, more about creativity, more about how to ignite an artist. And but now it's culminated into, especially with my experience in the music industry and understanding, working with all of these artists like Paul and Hannah McClure and Brian and Jen and Brandon Lake and Corey Asbury and Dante. And it's like, wow, seeing the behind the curtain of, number one, how genuine they are as just human beings, but what it takes, the work ethic and the continual, pumping the water of song making and songwriting. It's not just they, put their pen to paper and write a great song every time they sit down, you know. And so as I began to have experience with that, learning, and then having this hunger to not only see kingdom songs for the global church being written, but also this hunger of kingdom songs being written for the world, I began getting connected through fathering artists to all these artists that weren't just writing worship songs.
Mm.
They were writing, they were massively in love with Jesus and passionate about, kingdom and the eternal perspective. But what can I do through my creativity now that can be compelling and move the hearts and minds of individuals with just general market music as well?
Yeah.
And so now it feels like we've gone from growing and building can look very similar, but they're different. Growing, you can't speed up really. You plant a seed, you can't make it grow faster than it's going to grow, but you just water it, take care of it. But building, you can go faster. You can start putting things together, and either of those things out of order. It's not that one's better than the other, but it's just discerning what time it is. And I feel like now we're in a season of building, really putting together, not scaling in the sense of just like, you know, hey, we're going to take this formula and then reproduce it everywhere. But it really is like, oh, hold on. How can we? I've been listening to this guy, Peter Block, who's talking about how can we create these, you know, communities of belonging, which is a big word that we use a lot in fathering artists. Like, how can we do that without losing the potency of the local thing that we've done here in Reading? So we don't want to build just to kind of put these like imprints all over, the U.S. Or have a website and have people subscribe to everything. We're doing those things, but we're trying to really get to know people in different areas and aggregate hungry individuals that have a similar heart for what we're doing, and then cultivate that and grow things that way. But anyway,
Wow.
long story short, now we're trying to service, connect, build relationships with a lot of independent artists, um, not just in Reading, but hopefully all over the world. Pipe dreams down the road would be to start training coaches all over the United States at the beginning, begin to develop artist communities or artist houses
Mm.
in key creative hubs all over the US, and really facilitate, because 99% of my job really isn't all of my expertise in music or music industry. It's being able to encourage an artist to not quit and to
Mm.
come alongside of them and help them through the thresholds of fear and insecurity, give them encouragement. the emotional roller coasters. Yeah, you get the strategy. Yeah, you get the marketing stuff, the branding or the songwriting tips. That all is useful, but really it's more about because listen, all the artists have access. Anyone who wants to start a studio, you have access to all the tips and tricks on how to do that. You want to learn to play piano, you have all of you can go do it. The reality is most people won't.
Yeah.
The reason I don't work out is probably because I need a trainer. I need something to commit to, you know? And so I'm excited to start creating a place where we can be findable as these leaders, these fathers and mothers in the creative industry of music and help these artists not quit.
Yeah. That's awesome. Maybe Austin one day. It's Music City.
We are. We're looking to go to Austin.
That's awesome. That's so cool. We're kind of talking about the music industry right now, but it could be anything in life. You thought you'd be somewhere by this day, by this age, and you're not, you're frustrated or you're discouraged. We can limit ourselves to think it's only this way and it's only this thing. So by
Mhm.
looking at you as an example, you've got a band, you've got the studio, fathering artists. So I'd love to hear from you on maybe feeling frustrated or discouraged, but realizing there's so much creativity inside of us. And like I said, that can go across all walks of life, not just the music industry. So I'd love to hear your
Mhm.
thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on that. Um, we all definitely contribute to the direction our lives go. God has a plan for us. God is ultimately loving us and in control of, or we have access for Him to really lead and take control. Um, but we can't really determine those seasons of acceleration,
Mm,
so, and then when we compare ourselves to everyone else's stories or their lives, especially through social media, then we can really start to analyze and question, especially when you see where maybe someone's creative acceleration happens when they're 20, and now you're 30 and you're going, oh, did I miss it? Or 35, did I miss it?
yeah.
And so we can contribute to the acceleration at some level, right? If I really, really dig in to learning a craft, or if I really, really dig in, to, wanting to move in a direction, that does, we're co-laboring with the Lord and we're partnering with Him. And so that's the one thing that I've learned. I'm actually still learning is, you don't want to strive. You don't want to be doing things in your own effort, but every day we have choices. We have choices that we can make, and God's not always going to just wait around to talk audibly to us or lightning strike. We have to make choices. And so for me, I really try on a daily basis to do three things. Check my heart. Is my heart pure? I'm slowing down, connecting to my heart, connecting to my purpose on the planet. Is my heart pure? Okay, yeah. Two, am I considering God in whatever I'm going through that day? Um, yes. And then trying to actually make decisions based on what I think God's telling me to do. When we can get tripped on up on, is this right? Is this God's plan? And we measure constantly, measure. Like, am I doing the right thing? It's all right, wrong. And I think the Lord's going, and He showed me actually one time. I've shared this story a lot. So if people have heard me at Fathering Artists, they've heard this. But I was one day I kind of, not even thinking about God, saw these two God hands. One was holding measurement, this block letters with the word measurement, and the other one said adjustment. And the hands went like this and then just disappeared. And the Lord started to speak to me as I was kind of trying to discern what that was. And He was like, Eric, you're measuring way too often.
Mm,
You're measuring way too often. I would rather you make mistakes with a pure heart, considering me and trying to do what you think I said, than not doing anything and just measuring, waiting to do the perfect thing. And it's like, I want to be a rudder in God's hand, and I want to be a tender heart. And, you know, do you have kids yet? I can't remember.
Wow.
Not yet.
Right.
So if you, like with me and my child, if my, think about it, if you have a kid that genuinely has a pure heart, they're asking you how to do something, and then they think you said to do it this way, but it wasn't, you're not going to punish them. You're not going to ridicule them for that. You're going to then go, oh, no, that's not what I meant. I didn't say cut the red wire. I said cut the black wire. The bombs exploded. Next time, cut the,
Yeah.
you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? And that's, I feel like
Absolutely.
that's the Father's heart. He's like, I
Effective.
want to, I want to know that your heart's pure. I want you to, but I want you to just move. I
Mm.
want you to move and I want you to adjust more than you're measuring. And then when you do measure 6 months from now, look what you're going to have accomplished. Look what you're going to do. So, with regards to your question, I think it's really easy to look, you know, we can go to the history books and look at like some of our heroes, you know, and it's really easy to just glean the highlights from their life. But what we didn't realize is it was 12 years of this, and then it was 7 years of this, and then it was 15 years of this,
So true.
right?
So true.
And so can we have some measure of contribution to the things we do in our life? Of course, you could decide to move to Lockhart today, and you could move to Lockhart, and your life would change, and you know, but at the end of the day, um, if we get too caught up in comparing to some standard, there is no standard. Also, we never arrive. You never arrive. All I want to do is cultivate possibility, cultivate connection to God. The ultimate thing that I'm here to do on the planet, I may never see come to fruition. Like that's the facts, and that's kingdom. I might have some culminating things while I'm alive on this planet, but I can't rely on that. And
Mm.
so whatever I'm doing, you know, I heard, I say this almost every time I'm on a podcast, but it was so powerful when I heard it. And the Lord told me one day, I heard in my mind, my spirit, whatever you want to call it. He said, Eric, Jesus didn't reach his potential. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, Jesus didn't. And I was like, what? I went and sat down. I was like, Lord, what do you mean? He like finished the work on the cross. He was a perfect human, but God, but knew all of our pains, knew all of our frustrations. He accomplished the work on the cross. But as I sat there and just discerned, the Lord's like, no, he didn't reach his potential because he wasn't concerned about his potential. He was concerned about his assignment.
Wow.
And I think for me, I might make mistakes. I might not ever do everything perfectly. Maybe I could have accelerated something happening in my life quicker than it did. But as long as I can stay hungry for my assignment with the Lord, like, oh man, I just want to do what the Father's saying to do.
Yeah.
Jesus had potential to do tons of stuff.
Mm.
He could have been the physical king of the earth. He could have hopped off the cross. He could have, you know what I mean? Think
Absolutely.
about the potential he had.
Wow.
So we all have potential. And so sometimes we get caught up in like what other people's expectations of us, or what a coach wants, or what a parent wants, or what society wants, or what social media says we should be doing.
Wow.
And you know, you might be in a season, sometimes people, there's grace going on, that they just look better than they actually are.
Yeah.
And that's happened to me, it's probably happened to you. And then there's times where it seems like you're underachieving your potential, and people are going like, why don't you have a job and you're not making any money, and you're like, you know,
So true.
like, are you in your assignment? And so for me, I'm like, I feel like I'm constantly hungering for, Lord, what's my global assignment? Meaning, like, what's that broader connection to why I'm on the planet? But then also daily, what's my assignment?
Yeah.
You know? And it's not like I get caught up of like, I'm like, no, it's like I'm that rudder in his hand, but I also just move freely,
Yeah.
move with freedom. And then when I hear the Lord adjusting me, or a friend tells me something or what, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that wasn't smart. I'm going to adjust.
Yeah.
And think about how freeing that is. And so I don't know,
So
your
true.
original question, what was the original question again?
Just when you feel frustrated or discouraged, you thought you'd be somewhere else,
Yeah.
but also looking at the projects that you have, those side businesses, and going, okay, yeah, I want to do this, but maybe I could also do these other things, and being open to something else. And
Mm,
it's not just this one way that I have to do it. Just being open.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. 100%. And there's a lot of different personalities out there. And, you know, the person that's going to become, the scientist that's doing a life work over one amoeba, that maybe they're going to be a lot narrower, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Now, my personality, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. You know, I'm a wide relational person. And so for me, my challenge is narrowing a bit.
Mm,
But I also do know that that's what I'm also made for,
that's
is
right.
to ignite a lot of people and do multiple things. But I think too, another thing I would say is you can't do too many things at once. And sometimes because of this fear of missing out or fear of missing God's voice, what we end up not doing is we don't end up planting seeds and growing fruit. We're waiting for the perfect thing or the right thing. And then all of a sudden, 6 months goes by, 2 years goes by, 3 years goes by. Holy crap, it's already been 5 years since COVID. I was planning on doing these things and I still haven't. And we're waiting and we haven't actually planted something and grown a garden. So we're not feeding ourselves or anyone else.
Yeah. So
So
true.
my encouragement, if God's specifically spoken to you, well, then don't be an idiot. Do what he says, even if it's hard, even if it stinks.
So true.
Most of the time we're waiting and it's like plant a seed. Learn how to play the ukulele.
Yeah. Do something.
Do something. Do something. Move forward
Yeah.
and and then your story is going to be your story.
Yeah.
And someone 200 years from now can look back at the book of, the biography of your life and feed from the highlights of it. But they won't fully know the journey and what it took to press through and the frustrations and the wins and the losses. God told me this phrase a while back, but he said, the reality of something is actually way more beautiful than the perceptions that we have of those things.
Mm.
And oftentimes we live out of the perceptions, the way we want the world to be, the way I see something, my but the reality is actually way richer and way deeper, even in the pain, even in the frustrations, even in the loss. And if you can embrace that mindset, then you're going to have real potent relationships. You're going to have real outcomes that then start to reverberate out
Yeah.
and and grow something special and real and true and honest.
So good. So good. That part of your answer kind of leads into my next question of just bringing a dream to reality and achieving the things in your heart. They take a lot of hard work, consistency, and just not giving up on it. You kind of touched on that before, just with fathering artists. It's like we're going to finish this, we're going to start this, we're going to finish this. And I think sometimes you don't realize how hard it is to do something new. You have this idea, okay, well, it's going to be hard work, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it. And it's terrifying to start something new. Just even this podcast, it's terrifying to start something new. It's scary to ask people to come on when you have 100 followers. You're like, okay, yeah, I get it, but you're a very special human to say yes to this. So it's hard, but you can do it. So I'd love to hear your opinion on that. The hard work, the consistency, just don't quit.
Yeah, I mean, I think several things on that topic, but as you begin to dig into the stories of people's lives and you really start to hear the reality and the truth behind what got them there, you just discover that very quickly.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of artists that see another artist, and it's so easy to want to put the byproduct or the fruit of someone else's endeavors into our goal spot.
Mm, that's
We
good.
we put the fruit of someone else's life as our goal. That's a terrible goal.
Wow.
Like we can glean from them, we can respect that byproduct, we can be encouraged or inspired by it,
Yeah.
and maybe we can take pieces of it and learn from it, but that should not be our goal. And so when you see other people's lives, it can get kind of a little bit wonky and competitive. Um, but as you dig into stories, especially these artists that see, another person, usually they think, oh, maybe that was overnight success, or well, that opportunity just happened for them, and I want that thing. If you dig into their story, you'll realize, oh, it was 15 years. They've been doing this since, they failed 7 times. They got released from 3 labels. They blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
So everyone has that, most people. And like I said, acceleration happens earlier and quicker for some people, but we all go through seasons. It doesn't matter who you are, where that acceleration will decelerate.
Mm.
You will never see anyone's life be perfect acceleration upward their whole lives. It's just not going to happen. There are ebbs and flows. And so there are 4 stages of learning, no matter what you do.
Mm.
And I'll say, as an athlete, I grew up as an athlete, and learning what it takes to actually learn a skill set and then be able to implement that skill set with more ease really was a good model. There's lots of different good models out there. I'm not saying you need to be an athlete. Athletics was that for me, of learning what it looked like to work hard and to finish something and to put, risk, and to go push through anxiety and
Yeah.
push through fear. Um, and so these 4 stages of learning are important to learn. There's unconscious incompetence. Ignorance is bliss. I'm not aware of a standard and I can't do it.
Mm.
Then you go to conscious incompetence. Like, I've been made aware of a standard. Okay, I know what a good podcast looks like. I know how they set up their studio. It looks like they have some plants and lights. And so, but I can't do it still, whether it's money or skills or whatever. Then you go to conscious competence. I can do it, but I have to think about it. And then you move to the 4th stage, unconscious competence. So most people don't like going through those 4 stages. As soon as they hit conscious competence, they're like, I have to try to, I wish this was more organic. I wish I could just, this was natural. I'm just waiting for the what I've been made to do. And it's like, no, no one just grabs a tennis racket the first time and just knows what to do. You have to learn.
That's right.
And then you have to be very consciously competent at first. Oh, this is the starting position. This is contact point. This is finish, over and over again. And now when I play tennis, I don't think about how to hold the racket, how to swing the racket. I'm thinking about, how can I crush my opponent? Where do I want to hit the ball? So
Yeah.
I'm much more in that unconscious competence phase. So as you move through life, um, and you're looking to figure out what it takes, you know, a lot of times people, especially now, it's so easy to get stimulated, the dopamine rush, the new thing. I can change, I can do this, I can do that. And people aren't finishing things,
Mm.
you know? I
So
want the next greatest podcast that's going to inspire me. I want the next greatest job. I want to blah, blah, blah. And so, and when you do that, if I stop watering, going back to that seed analogy, if I stop watering the seed, well, the seed will die and it won't actually grow anymore. And so then you're not finishing things and producing, a byproduct from your passions or your efforts. So unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, unconscious incompetence. That's the journey we're all on. And those are the people that you really are in awe and respect for, right? And it doesn't matter if you end up having local impact and that's it. That doesn't matter. One
right.
is not better than the other. Global success versus local success, that isn't the right litmus test of success.
Yeah.
Are you doing the thing that makes you come alive? Are you finishing things? Are you stewarding that gift? Are you in your assignment? Are you chasing the God that has dreams for you instead of chasing the dreams God has for you?
Mm.
It's alignment. you know, and staying aligned and being a rudder in his hand and being willing to move and trust that he's going to show you when you're doing something wrong instead of get tripped up on, being perfect.
So good. I just wanted to hear a little bit about your band that we talked about a little bit earlier. When did you start it? What kind of music do you guys play? Who all's in the band?
Yeah, okay. So in 2014, we started to get together and just write. It was um, four guys, a guitar player, a, a keys and bass player who was also producing, and then a drummer. And then I was lead vocals. And so we just started making music again. Like I said, we thought we were going to do worship stuff and then slowly realized we weren't going to do that. And then in 2015, we started recording our first single called Weightless. And we work with a producer named Lael. His name is Jeff Schneeweiss. He fantastic Grammy award winning producer. And yeah, we were just scraping money together, um, family helping us. At the time we had, normally when you record something, you want to have probably a pool of 20, 30 songs that you're narrowing down to, you
Mm.
know, an 8 to 10 song album or maybe a 6 to 8 song EP or something. And we had 5 songs. And I'll remember Jeff going like, no, we need to do a full album. And he's always stretching people. And so he definitely was. I'm like, well, we don't even have that many songs, but it pushed us to just keep writing
Yeah.
and really, really, really proud of that first project. Um, yeah, so we just started recording music together over the years, and I mean, my biggest influences, I burn for the worship, expression, and I love, what Bethel puts out in Hillsong and so many different, movements around the world. But I mean, I'll never forget finding a U2 tape from my brother that I think he was hiding from our parents because at the time we couldn't listen to secular music. Um, and I was like, what is this? And I had this little Walkman in my bed. And I remember just staying up listening to that whole album like multiple times, crying in my bed as a young teenager. And so, those kind of bands were really my early influences, like, REM and The Cure and Depeche Mode and Erasure. And so I had this blend of like band, but also synth pop, um, and were kind of my biggest, influences. And then as I got older, loving Coldplay and, um, but I have a really, really wide musical you know, love for genres. But yeah, so we're kind of in that band lane, melodic. I go up into falsetto and kind of more anthemic, uplifting kind of pop,
Yeah.
synth pop with band elements type stuff. Yeah.
Love it. So how many
So yeah,
instruments?
and now it really scaled down because one of the guys had to move away. Actually, two of the guys.
Oh man.
We're still in relationship, and they'll contribute to ideas from here and there. But it's mainly me and Luke Randolph, who produces a lot of the music now that we release. And so he'll send me tracks and ideas and like sound beds basically, and then I'll top line over that and write melodies and lyrics. I can play the guitar and piano enough to write music, and so I'll send him ideas, and then he'll riff off of that. But yeah, we just kind of, I'm not on a, artist trajectory to try to make an artist career. And that's a very big distinction as I'm developing artists. It's like, if you want to create music and record music, and that's awesome. That's great. That's a very different lane of like, I'm actually trying to establish an artist career that's going to pay my bills.
Mm.
But in doing that, I just love it. I want to be recording until I can't stand up behind a microphone or get any breath out of my lungs. So.
Yeah, it's just music's just great, and to be able to kind of get a release with that to sing and to play, it's just nothing like it.
Yes.
Nothing, and it's so easy to. Well, I feel like if you know the piano, everything else comes much easier. If it's a natural gift, if music's a
Mm.
natural gift, if you can learn that piano, it's like, man, you can learn pretty much anything, I feel like.
Yep. I think
But
that's the biggest lie for, people that want to grow in their music is these are all just skills, and these skills can be taught, and you can learn. You just have to spend time. Now, there are obviously people that are maybe more naturally
Yeah.
musical, or maybe their voice is naturally, it's easier for them to sing than others or find a pitch. That's just true, but everyone can learn a skill set
Yeah.
if they want to get going. So, um, yeah.
So what all do you play? You sing, guitar, piano, drums?
Yeah, I used to play trumpet back in the day. I've been picking up the trumpet recently. It's kind of funny, but yeah, drums were my first instrument, and that's probably the best, where I've got the deepest skill.
Okay.
Um, but I love the piano. I write more, you know, probably moody and sad sounding, beautiful music on the piano, and I'll write maybe a little bit more uplifting on the guitar.
Yeah.
And together we collab, and there's a blend of stuff. So
It's easy to get moody on the piano with those pretty minors.
yes,
Those are my
exactly.
favorites, the pretty minors.
No, it's hard. It's harder to write the faster, more upbeat song without it sounding cheesy. It's an art form.
Oh
That's
yeah.
why most worship songs are slower.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So, as we stated earlier, you've got your businesses and organizations and things like that. How could people support you in that? What's a way for people to get involved and support you?
no, that's awesome. Thanks for asking. So we did create Fathering Artists as a 501(c)(3). So it's a nonprofit, state of California, and we're going after it. Basically, I finished my time at Bethel in February 2023
Mm.
and felt like it was my legacy work to really build out Fathering Artists more full time. And so we were going to do a for-profit model, but decided through this relationship we had with an amazing business development consultant to go into a nonprofit. So, long story short, you can get involved on our Instagram and our website. So, www.fatheringartists.com. And then Instagram, you can go to the link in the bio on Instagram. And on the webpage, there's a donate button that'll take you to a portal where you can find out more about how to give. It's all tax deductible um, giving. And so we're trying to bolster our fundraising for that to really pour into independent artists.
Nice. That's
And
awesome.
then the band, you can find us at Allen Music 222 on Instagram
Okay.
and on Spotify, iTunes, anywhere that you can stream music, you can find us.
Nice. Awesome. I've listened to a little bit. I'm gonna check it out more.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so
Never
much.
really, you bet. I'd never really heard you sing, I don't think. I remember what was the band called? Amber before? What was it called?
Amber Nation.
Okay, I remember listening to a little bit of it then. And so that was the first time I had heard you sing. Very nice.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's very similar to what we're doing now, um, as well. Similar sound. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in choir. I sang in choir in high school and would sing at weddings and started leading worship once I could, play the guitar, started leading worship. I was behind the drums more though than I
Mhm.
was up front. But yeah, I love it.
Me too. I love it. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time on the Questions Podcast.